This morning, we had the distinct pleasure of welcoming General J. Raymond, Chief of Space Operations for U.S. Space Force, and his team for the official signing of a Memorandum of Understanding between UND and Space Force. The signing gives UND the designation as the first institution in the nation to be part of Space Force's new University Partnership Program. General Raymond has since departed Grand Forks, and we are so appreciative of the time he was able to spend with us here today. We're also honored to have with us today both senators from the great state of North Dakota. Senator John Hoeven and Senator Kevin Cramer have been instrumental in UND's burgeoning collaborations with U.S. Space Force and many others in the field of space-related research. We're also blessed to have with us representation from Congressman Kelly Armstrong's office, Miss Jana Ness. Where are you, Jana? There you are. Thank you for being here today. Your presence here today shows what a strong collaboration we have amongst our congressional delegation, so thank you very much. In a few minutes, Senator Hoeven and Senator Cramer will join UND President Andy Armacost and UND Aerospace Dean Bob Kraus in offering remarks about UND's involvement with Space Force and the University Partnership Program. Before I turn over the floor to the President, just a couple of housekeeping items to discuss. After we have concluded remarks, I will open the floor to questions. This press conference is being live streamed to other members of the media who could not be here in person. They are able to see and hear the press conference, but cannot offer questions. If anyone who is tuning in via Zoom has questions for our panelists, please feel free to submit them to me, and I will do my best to get them answered for you in a timely fashion. My contact info is in the media advisory you should have received this morning. Members of the press who are present here today should have also received a copy of the official UND U.S. Space Force press release. Following this press conference, we will be sending out a digital version of the release that will include photos from this morning's MOU signing with General Raymond. Video B-roll also will be available upon request. Now with that, I would like to turn the microphone over to UND President Andy Armacost for his remarks.
Thanks, Dave. What a wonderful day for UND and for the Space Force. If we think back to January of 2020, when General Raymond paid his first visit to the University of North Dakota, it was the beginning of conversations that would enable this memorandum of understanding to actually happen. And so through the tremendous support of so many people, in particular our senators from the great state of North Dakota, Senator Hoeven and Senator Cramer, and their tireless efforts to build this relationship, as well as the efforts of many local leaders, both elected and business leaders, and the extraordinary efforts of our faculty and staff members to conceive of an idea and put it into practice, an idea that would bring UND and the Space Force together. This relationship will focus on educational opportunities as well as research opportunities. And in its early days, the work on this effort has catalyzed efforts from across the campus, pulling together experts in a variety of disciplines, spanning our colleges and schools, from science and engineering to policy and law. And we know that UND can make an extraordinary impact on our national security through the efforts via this collaboration. We are honored to be the first of 10 schools to sign this Memorandum of Understanding. And we are honored again to have General and his staff joining us here in Grand Forks today. So with that, let me turn it over to our senators for their comments as well. Again, we appreciate all the work that they had done to make this day happen.
Thank you, President Armacost. Great to be here with you and Dean Kraus, and of course, certainly great to be here with Senator Cramer. I could not have a better partner in the Senate. He's tremendous to work with across the board, but there's no question but he's been an incredible leader in this effort, and he's been an incredible leader in setting up and standing up Space Force. I'm going to let him talk about that a little bit more, because as a member of the Armed Services Committee, he was absolutely instrumental in standing up Space Force, without a doubt. I'm on defense approach, so I work on the funding side, and so obviously I've worked on it as well. Also, I want to mention Kelly Armstrong has been tremendous, part of our team as well, and so he wasn't able to be here today, but we just want to, again, thank him as well. This is another first for the University of North Dakota. This is another first for Grand Forks. This is another first for North Dakota in aviation. We are the first member of the University Partnership Program with Space Force, the very first. Just like we were the first partner in the first UAS test site, okay? And we're leading the way with all things UAS. We were the first center of excellence for unmanned aviation, and here we are, the first partner for Space Force. The important, well, there's a lot of important things, but one of the important things to think about in terms of this partnership agreement is this is a long-term agreement, okay? This isn't just a one-time deal, hey, we're going to do this project. This is a relationship that's going to involve as many projects as the creativity here, which is off the chart, can come up with. And so this involves a lot more than just the John D. Odegaard School of Aviation and Aerospace. This, I think, really goes across the university and creates really, again, sky is the limit kind of opportunities. I mean, we're only limited by our imagination. And one of the things that we've talked about recently, just to give you an example, is the low Earth orbit communications mission, where at the Grand Forks Air Force Base Grand Sky, we'll be working as one of the two, along with Redstone locations, communicating with these low Earth orbit satellites. And we're not just talking about a few satellites, we're talking about thousands of satellites. Think of the opportunities as we put those up into space, the opportunities that creates. And so one of the things that I talked about a little bit today, and a big shout out to General Raymond, he's a champion, he's dynamic. He's like Derek Tenier, the head of the Space Development Agency, who we had up here. These guys want to rock and roll, and we want to help them rock and roll, without a doubt. And we intend to do that, put resources behind them so that they can really make this happen. Because remember, you never say whoa in a horse race. And we're in a horse race, not only in terms of all things ISR at Grand Forks Air Force Base, the new technologies that come there, all things UAS, unmanned aviation in the commercial world, as well as the military world and all those applications, but we're in the race in space. And the University of North Dakota is very much a part of that race, and Grand Sky, our base, all the things we're doing here are very much a part of winning that race in space. And so just kind of two wrap-up thoughts. One is we want to change the paradigm. The paradigm has been, on behalf of Grand Forks Air Force Base, I mean, we've got this tremendous community group here, and I'm not going to start naming them because I'll miss somebody, but we have just this incredible community group that supports the base, and all your great legislators that have put so much resources into our Centers of Excellence effort, which is now more than 15 years old. I mean, we're the ones that started before others were even thinking about it. But we've always gone to the military and said, hey, would you base this mission here? Or would you base that mission here? Or would you base this mission here? We've totally changed that paradigm. We now are working on 4 or 5 or more different kind of missions and relationships, whether you're talking the latest and greatest in ISR, or whether you're talking about all things UAS, whether you're talking about reaching out into space, whether you're talking about these kind of partnerships. We're creating a unique asset here, a set of capabilities, a set of partnerships with more than a dozen different partners, where we want not only Air Force, Space Force, but really all of the armed services and DOD coming to us saying, you know what, we'd like to do this or that, or add this mission, or add something else here in Grand Forks, because you have capabilities and resources that nobody else has. And that's what's happening. And I'll just close with this to give you an example of, the ramifications. So I was at Cape Canaveral with Derek Tenier, the head of Space Development Agency, and we were there because a Falcon 9 rocket, SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket was taking a number of satellites from General Atomics into space, because these are satellites that General Atomics will be developing laser communications, ground to satellite, satellite to satellite, and UAS aircraft to satellite. We'd secured the funding for them to do that. And so SpaceX was putting a number of those satellites in space for that low Earth orbit mission, communications mission, but specifically to develop the laser testing, which is going to be done out of Grand Sky here in Grand Forks. The remarkable thing, though, that I didn't realize is that that Falcon 9 SpaceX rocket took off with those satellites, went out, put them in space wherever they were supposed to be, released them. Then the rocket turns around in space, flies back down to where it took off, flips around, and lands either on that pad or a barge right nearby. The whole point is space flight is here. I mean, go back and look at those Star Wars movies where the rocket took off with people or payload, went to its destination, and came back. That's what we're doing today. And we went over to the SpaceX hangar afterwards. There were 9 Falcon 9 rockets in that hangar. All 9 of them, each and every one had already flown 10 missions where they'd gone out into space, done their mission, and come back. And they can carry payload, and they have capsules that can carry people. Space travel is here, and the University of North Dakota and Grand Forks is a big part of it. So congratulations, President Armacost. You're the first, and I know you're going to do great things with it. Dean, appreciate it. And Kevin, thanks for all your hard work on it.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Hoeven, for your mentorship and your leadership. Maybe I'll tell just a little bit of the story from the beginning, because I think it's important. I'll do it quickly. But, you know, when I was elected to the Senate in 2018, my first assignment was to the Armed Services Committee. And North Dakota's never had a member of the Armed Services Committee. And I asked for a position on the Armed Services Committee because I wanted to, you know, I was always impressed with North Dakota's military assets, and I wanted to advocate for those assets and to demonstrate what we have to the Department of Defense and others that would pay attention, right? So, but shortly into my first term, I had the opportunity to invite my friend, Jim Bridenstine, who served on the Space Committee with me in the House of Representatives, and at the time he was the NASA administrator, to invite him up to UND. Now, one thing about the University of North Dakota and the John D. Odegaard School is when you're in this space world out there, it's not a tough sell. It's very well known. So it's not like we're introducing them to the newest thing. We're introducing them to something that they know very well. Obviously, UND was already doing a lot of work with NASA. The next one then was when the president and the vice president at the time called me and said, would you be our champion for a Space Force in this year's National Defense Authorization Act? And I thought to myself, what about the other 14 members, you know, on our side that could do it? We think you're the right guy. Well, come to find out, of course, I was glad to do it largely because of this place, largely because of where we're standing right now. I knew that we had an asset to contribute to the space studies and the opportunities and workforce development in the new warfighting domain that I'd never, ever have to over-describe. I just have to open a door and let people come and see it for themselves if they weren't already familiar. Well, in addition to that, Space Command and a lot of the, we've been ahead in space for a long, long time in the military, but it's all of the forces that have their own sort of piece of space, but not a Space Force. But there has been a Space Command off and on. But space, in terms of warfighting, began with strategic forces, STRATCOM, Strategic Command. And of course, Minot has 2 legs of the nuclear triad. So we already have a reputation in this arena. So we stand up a Space Force in last year's Defense Authorization Act, and lo and behold, you know, here we go, we're off and running. When General Raymond was named the commander, the very first chief of space operations. Now, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but one of the big fights that I had, and one of the very specific, well, really 3 specific amendments that I offered to the legislation on the very day that we passed it out of committee, was to make sure that the first chief of space operations would be on day 1 a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and that the chain of command would go not through some sort of circuitous route to the top, but rather would answer directly to the Secretary of the Air Force, because Space Force is a branch of the Air Force, or part of the Air Force, much like the Marines are part of the Navy. Okay, so he gets named, and right after the President signs the bill, he names General Raymond, and I said, now, for your first trip, let's go to Grand Forks. That was not a tough sell, just so you all know, for those that don't. General Raymond's very first assignment was the Grand Forks Air Force Base. And not only was it his first assignment, long before he had 4 stars on his shoulder, it's where he met his wife. He met his wife right here at the University of North Dakota. She's an alum, master's degree as well, and so they have an affection. Well, why do I say that? I say that because relationships matter. Relationships matter, at least in opening the door. So he came up to Grand Forks, and the rest is sort of history. But he sat around the very same table that John and I and the dean and the president and a whole bunch of other smart people, all of whom have now job openings that I can't even pronounce. And he did a little round table to discuss what they would need, what Space Force will need in terms of human capital going forward. At that time, the discussion was centered around a UARC, a university research collaboration project, very familiar to the military. But that focuses on research. As time went on and the assets became clearer and the fight became clearer, he broadened it to become a UPP, a University Partnership Program. Why? Because it's not just about research and development, it's about human development. And it spans the sphere. All right. All of that said, John's done a good job of talking about how we broadened that to include the Space Development Agency. But here's one of the things that I think is so cool, and what we witnessed yet once again today, gentlemen, thank you so much. When you sit around the table with our military leaders and our intellectual and research and academic assets at this university, you sit there and you go, man, are we blessed. Man, are we blessed. We get to, as John said, not just advocate on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce to have a certain type of mission at our base, but we get to demonstrate to our military the incredible assets we have to contribute to the security of the world. To the security of the world. And they did that again today. So this has just been a great honor to be a part of it. I'm grateful that you all let me play in this sandbox. And I'm always just so very proud to, like I said, open the door, make an introduction, and then have all of these smart people around Grand Forks validate my good decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators. And last but not least is our newest Dean of the John D. Odegaard School of Aerospace Sciences, Bob Kraus. I yield the floor to you, Dr. Kraus.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to say hello, thank you, and I want to say thank you to President Armacost, first for hiring me, but for his leadership of the university, especially to get us to the point that we are today. And then to both of the senators that are here, and I'll talk a little bit about how each one of them has contributed. So Senator Cramer talked about how he's been bulldogging the Space Force and space investments here. Senator Hoeven was a proponent early on of the UAS development that's here. So when I stepped into the role 8.5 months ago, they handed me 2 books. One of them is called Flight of the Odegaard, which was the kind of the history of John Odegaard and how this college got started. For those who aren't familiar, going back in time a little bit, back in the 1980s, John Odegaard connected with Buzz Aldrin and stood up a space studies department here at the University of North Dakota. And that's really what got our foot in the door with that space stuff. Since that time, we've administered over 800 master's degrees in space studies, a significant portion of which are in the military. And today, we're over 100 master's degree students, and about 30% of them are active duty military. So we have a long history of supporting them. The second book that was handed to me was called Nowhere But North Dakota. Not nowhere in or nowhere is, but nowhere but North Dakota. And it's Bruce Smith's tenure as the dean, who was the second dean of this college. And really what it was, it's that unique combination of resources and people and assets and leadership at the congressional level that allowed us to develop to where we are today. So the UAS infrastructure that we have today started out as let's create a UAS training program, let's create a degree, let's get it accredited, let's now turn this into spin-off businesses and turn it into an ecosystem, which is now spun off into the Northern Plains UAS test site and a statewide beyond visual line of sight network. That's effectively what we're doing today. is that first step, leveraging the experience we have from the UAS system and development, and now bringing that into the space world, using the expertise and experience that we have, not just within the Odegaard School, but also across the rest of the university, specifically the College of Engineering and Mines and the College of Arts and Sciences. So the deans from those colleges and myself have been working over the past year with the Vice President of Research and Economic Development to basically come up with how we're going to implement the next phase of this. I do have to give a call out to our state legislators who in this year's session authorized $4 million for space infrastructure funding. And then on behalf of the university, we're throwing in, both between our colleges and the university itself, another several $1 million to hire new faculty and to grow upon the already outstanding programs that we have, but to take them to the next level. And so with that, I want to thank everyone for coming, and I'll turn it back over to Dave.
Thanks, Dr. Kraus. I'm now going to open the floor to questions for the senators. Dr. Kraus, feel free.
Well, I want maybe for Senator Hoeven, since you're the appropriations guy. Dr. Kraus talked a bit about some of the financing. Is there seed money from the federal side into this as well, or does the research dictate the federal money?
Yeah, no, Space Force has an account right now. It's about a $47 million account, which they have the flexibility to use for these university partnership programs. That doesn't mean they'll use all of it on it. They'll use it on a variety of things, but they'll be able to draw from that for these partnerships. And remember, that's what they have right now, but this will be an ongoing program. Like I say, this establishes a relationship where now we'll have any number of research projects, training events, technology development. I think Bob could tell you a lot more about it, obviously, than I could. But so really, it's a relationship where we can become a hub of this research and development. And it's something we'll fund into Space Force on an annual basis. But the account they have to start with this is about $47 million.
Yeah, but there's no check that comes with today's MOU, right? It's more research-driven.
The check will come as they outline the projects they do. And we're the first ones, so we got a head start. It's always good to have a head start, right?
So if I could add to that a little bit, some of the expertise we already have is more from an advisory capacity. So we have an expertise in space policy and law. So the University of North Dakota in our program, we have a space law expert. Additionally, we have the workforce development side of it. So we have those existing master's degree and PhD students that are within that. Now, in terms of the research grants, that will involve us going through proposals and applying to the different granting organizations for that. We have a long history of getting grants from NASA and through Pablo De Leon, our space studies chair. And it's now looking at what other space proposals can we apply for, and there's a significant number of them. What's nice now is because we've been collaborating more and more with the other colleges, we're now able to put in interdisciplinary proposals that have a better chance of success. That funding is also there, and there's a significant amount of funding on that side.
Yeah, I would just say, Doug, they're going to earn every dollar that they get. They're going to earn it because they're going to produce a product that is in high demand and a product that will be excellent. So I have no doubt that they'll be very successful. Now, I would tell you this as well. Senator Hoeven talked a little bit about the race. You guys, we're first in space. We are. We're with the combined, services and the work we've been doing. We're first, but we're not the fastest right now. Our near-peer adversaries are in space in a big way. They have not just really good satellites. They have dangerous satellites. General Raymond's done an incredible job of declassifying a lot of information that has helped, I think, us tell the story and the importance of the space domain and why we need to be there. Senator Hoeven talked about the redundancy of low Earth orbiting satellites. The nice thing about what Senator Hoeven described with what SpaceX is doing is that when we stood up Space Force, one of the things I said, if I said it once, I said it 100 times, while we're standing it up and since in oversight hearings, How are you saving money? How are you doing more with the same amount of money? What are you doing to simplify the process? How is acquisition going? Can we please speed things up? Well, Jay Raymond has actually eliminated 2 layers of middle management. And my hope is that Space Force shows the rest of the military how they can change to more modernize this process. All of that to tell you that we need to do as much as we can with the dollars they have, and then continue to invest in it, because space is a very, very important domain. What this program that the UPP does is it's really an extension of the relationship with the private sector. And that presents all kinds of commercial opportunities. And the ecosystem that's been developed and continues to be developed at this university, and really up and down the corridor. I would include North Dakota State University in that. You know, and I won't get into all that right now, but there's a lot of opportunity to attract the type of not just research and human development, but then industry development as well. And you get to be at the forefront of it all. And we pretend like you're just starting. You've been doing it well for decades. One other thing I would add to the ecosystem discussion. One of the things that General Raymond said to me the very first time he came here, when we were here a little over, or about a year and a half ago, he said, you know, satellites are remotely piloted aircraft, basically. So exactly what you're talking about, the UAS culture that Senator, then Governor Hoeven really led here, lends itself exactly to what we're talking about today and what we're going to need going into the future.
Well, that's right. And that Kevin mentioned, and it's right on, is remember the culture for Space Force is to combine military with the civilian development. So when you look at Elon Musk and SpaceX and these other companies, they're a big part of this space rocket satellite development. General Atomics out here, they're not only flying the ISR aircraft here out of Grand Sky, out of a private sector technology park on a military base, right? They're developing the laser to these satellites. So you've got this incredible confluence of the military and the private sector working together, which we started with Grand Sky. So it's the same paradigm now on a national basis that we developed here with Grand Sky. So it's a great fit. I mean, there's just a lot of synergy there.
You know, I just have to add to this, because when John tells the story of going to SpaceX and seeing the 9 Falcon 9s in the hangar out at Kennedy, that hangar is the old Apollo hangar. Their launch pad is the Apollo launch pad. And when you go to Kennedy today, every building that used to be a government-owned building is now has a private sector tenant in it. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, anybody you can think of, that blue, you know, it's all out there. And I think this example here is exactly is duplicating basically what's going on there, except this is military centric in some cases. Now, remember, the military is not the only entity that's dependent on satellites. Everything is dependent on satellites, our GPS, our cell phones. You don't do a transaction today with your bank without some satellites. So I understand the internet went down for a half hour a little bit ago. These are the things that we're trying to avoid, and Space Force is an important part of it.
Well, you have time for a couple more questions.
I just wanted to ask, you've talked about this a little bit before, but how much is the public aware of the importance of space and the threats that are in space? And how does this tie in?
Well, Kevin touched on that. Matter of fact, General Raymond talked about some things in our meeting up here today that I actually had not heard outside the skiff.
Yeah, me too.
In regard to what's going on in space, and that, you know, we have always taken the approach in space non-militarized, but unfortunately some of our near peers, particularly Russia, also to some extent China, took a more aggressive posture in that regard. And he talked about some of those things today that, again, I'm not even sure, before were classified, but he talked about how, I mean, part of the reason we've changed our strategy is because the paradigm up there now is you have, you know, some number of satellites that cost hundreds of millions or billions. We're going to change that, so we have thousands of satellites up there that might cost a few million to maybe, you know, like 100 million, something like that. But remember, this SpaceX rocket just put 5 SDA satellites, when I went down to Cape Canaveral, they put up 5 satellites. So they're putting these satellites up now at a regular, so we're changing our paradigm to deal with that threat. General Raymond made the point, not only is it important that the public understand what we're doing so we can get support to do it, right, both on the authorizing and the funding side, but also so we can communicate to our adversaries like China and like Russia, hey, you better not be up there messing with our satellites, and we take steps to counter that. And so you have to be able to talk about some of this stuff because we have to talk to our adversaries about it as well as our allies, as well as the public.
Well said. It's very important when you're trying to deter your enemy that they know you know what they know. Right. And that's what, it's kind of a funny balance, right? But when you have near-peer allies, you can either have deterrence or you can have great power conflict in a war, and we want to avoid the war.
Yeah, even developing the rules of the road. I mean,
Yeah.
think about ships at sea. That has not been developed in space.
Yeah.
We have to develop that. Gee, maybe a role for UND in that effort,
Yeah.
right?
Last question from the city.
What's the kind of timeline for when we'll see a lot of this work come to fruition? I know that Dr. Kraus, you mentioned that, you guys are going to be hiring faculty and everything like that. What's the kind of timeline and all of that?
Well, much of the work is beginning now, laying a great foundation. The university has committed about $9 million itself to fund new faculty positions in a variety of synergistic areas to work on issues related to the Space Force. In addition, the state itself had invested or funded us to the tune of about $4 million, the opportunity to create facilities that will support this work in space, whether this is secure facilities to do classified work or design facilities to build and launch satellites or ground stations to actually communicate with orbiting satellites. And so that work is beginning now. And let's not forget there are many areas of research that the university has participated in already that tie directly to the needs of the Space Force. And so the combination of existing expertise plus the expertise that we're hiring will be an important way to bring this all together.
Let me add to that as well, remembering that apart from all of the things we've already talked about, this becomes a very major attraction for talent to the school in the form of students. Just as sure as there's a space race, there is a workforce race, particularly in the STEM disciplines. And this is all about STEM disciplines. One of the things, when General Raymond and I went up to Cavalier last year, that was in February. I'll never forget, it was 15 degrees below zero. We're in Blackhawks, it was cold. Anyway, we went up to Cavalier, and one of the selling points, and oh, by the way, he spoke to the ROTC cadets here. A few months later, General Dickinson, the commander of Space Command, spoke to those same cadets, maybe half a year later. One of the things that all of this does is becomes an attraction unlike any other place, really, for people who have an interest. Within the Air Force, whether it's the Academy or ROTC or existing Air Force personnel and the other forces. I mean, General Raymond's assistant today is a Marine officer, a lieutenant colonel. They're converting to Space Force to the tune of hundreds for every one position open in many respects. And so I think the same is true with this opportunity. This becomes an attraction for the university to grow as well as the major contribution it makes to our national security.
So the thing I would add to that, so in terms of when this will start, so to echo what President Armacost said, we're building not from zero. So we've already got this existing infrastructure that's out there. In terms of the infrastructure itself, we want to do it the right way because we're looking to build this for the long term. And so if we're going to build labs and offices and things like that, we want to make sure that we're picking the right facility to place these things so we're not having to redo things later. In terms of the hiring, it starts today. So my college, I believe we have 2 ads that we're supposed to go live today. I know engineering and mines and arts and sciences are shortly behind, and they're going to have ads out soon for those new faculty hires. We should have new faculty in place as early as spring semester. More likely it'll be next summer, but that's what we're looking at. We're hoping to get some of these faculty in as soon as we can.
Go ahead, Senator.
Well, I just say, ideally, I'd like us also to be thinking about, we've got the ISR mission, we've got the LEO low Earth orbit communications mission with the satellites. We've got other things that we're working on that correlate with things UAS in the commercial sector, not just in the military sector. But ultimately, as we develop all this, we should also be thinking about, why don't we have one of the ground-based stations where you have all the people that do all the analysis and the communications and the logistics and the development and handle all that data? Because remember, these satellites are going to be commanding military and civilian operations globally. You need a lot of people to synthesize and handle that information and communicate it and so forth. Boy, it seems to me with the University of North Dakota here training people, that's just another natural step in the progression for us. And I think that's how we have to think about it.
That concludes our press conference today. Thank you so much to everybody for coming out here and celebrating this historic day with us. Thank you.